and more fishing boats out there, it's come down to 65, 70 million tons. The more you fish, the fewer fish you catch. Water supplies, you just name it, everything is running out. And here's the one from FAO on food. This is a world total grains days of supply, the number of days of supply on the planet of food grains. Used to hover around 100, a little bit better than that, maybe 110 days in past years. But in the last decade, look at it. It's come down to nearly 50. And there are more and more hungry people anyway. And the species are disappearing at a rate that has not been seen since the dinosaurs disappeared. In 60-odd million years, we've never seen this kind of extinction rate. Some people claim it's more than 100 species a day are being lost. And this particular species, does anyone know what this is? It's a rosy periwinkle, quite right. Now, it's a rosy periwinkle, which is the only known source of pharmaceuticals for childhood leukemia. When a kid gets blood cancer, the only way to cure it is with drugs derived from that. And now, this rosy periwinkle is restricted to a few hectares of land in Madagascar, disappearing rapidly. And it's only one of thousands of things that are disappearing, which are important for either food or for medicines or for something. You see this tuna? That man's having a great time with his chainsaw, but this was on the 6th. This picture was taken on the 6th of January this year, 2012. This bluefin tuna sold for $750,000. One fish, $730,000. It's gone. First of all, it's sold for that much because they're hard to catch. And secondly, if you've got that kind of a price, if there are any more left, you can be sure there won't be for very long. This is a dramatic example of what we've done to a species that's not only truly magnificent, it's one of the highest forms of creation. It can swim at 60 kilometers an hour across the Atlantic, across the Pacific. It's an incredible creature, and we have completely eliminated it. This is a little cartoon from WWF saying it's all over, basically. Our friends in Stockholm, the Stockholm Resilience Center and the Stockholm Environment Institute, came up with this diagram, which they call the Planetary Boundaries. And the Planetary Boundaries, they listed about 9 of them. They include climate change, ozone, depletion, aerosol loading in the atmosphere, ocean acidification, chemical pollution, biodiversity loss. These are the big 9 sort of threatening global well-being. And they apply to what we call biosphere people, people who live off the biosphere, who have access to anything from anywhere in the world. And these are the stakeholders who care about these things. But there's also the second disease. And the second disease, which is truly abominable because it's painful right from the beginning, is also a terminal disease, and it's called povertitis. Povertitis is a disease that afflicts almost half the people on this planet. And that's basically the kind of condition they live in. And that's partially a result of the combination of affluenza and povertitis. The affluent keep logging away and destroying resources because of greed, and the poor out of the exigencies of survival because of need. It may be more understandable, but the overall impact is the same. And they're caught in a permanent trap. This disease feeds on itself, and it feeds together with affluenza, as I'll show you in a second, and you can never get out of it. This basically is about the social boundaries. gender issues, poverty, unemployment, illiteracy, displacement, alienation, violence, marginalization, and deprivation. Primary stakeholders, ecosystem people, the people who actually live on a day-to-day basis with the ecosystem, who draw their waters and their food and their fruits and their nourishment from the ecosystem directly. They don't have supermarkets to go to. Now, it turns out, if you do the analysis, as I have done for a lifetime, that neither extreme is good for the world, for the future, or for the people. Even for the rich, to have extremes of affluence and poverty don't work. Affluence is highly resource intensive. It uses up what we call non-renewable resources, the fossil fuels, the metals, all the things that you need to build roads and ports and dams. All that is hugely threatened and depleted by affluence. But the poor also have an impact on resources and making them scarce. Their impact is usually on what we call renewable resources, but they make them non-renewable by overutilizing them beyond the capacity of their regeneration. So either way, you've got too much affluence, too much poverty, you cannot have a sustainable resource base. And it leads to highly unproductive uses of resources if you're poor, because you have to make compromises, you have to cut corners, and you tend to use them in ways that are not good. This is the old champagne glass theory of life. It's a diagram that comes from the 1990 Human Development Report of UNDP, the very first one, and it shows at that time in 1990, and I took it straight from there, that 85% of the world's income and wealth goes to the top 20%, and the bottom 8%, 7% goes to the bottom 50%. The figures, of course, as you all know, have gotten much, much more extreme than that now. Now we're talking about 99 and 1%. In fact, it's probably 99.9% of the wealth goes to a very small number of people, and the rest of the world has to put up with extremely little. So here we are. This is the affluenza, and this is the povertitis. And that situates us in a map that tells us that Mother Nature is in deep trouble, just as her children ourselves are. The resources are being depleted, and the ecosystem services that we depend on are being destroyed. This requires planetary medicine. This requires global action at a global scale. Well, planetary medicine needs planetary doctors, and of course our own doctors there too. But you know, we've got all these people. They came last month to Rio, as did some of our friends here, Lena and I, and a few others, and a lot of others, in fact, 50,000 others, to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil to consider what needs to be done. So what I'm talking about isn't completely airy-fairy. There are people out there who recognize we've got a problem. The problem is, the meta-level problem is that they didn't know how to deal with it. So they went away after 2 weeks of negotiations with very little in the way of solutions. The solutions were left to people like you and me, civil society, NGOs, universities, people who don't actually have the power to do all that much. They were the ones who had the solutions. But these heads of state and heads of government made astoundingly perceptive statements, but came to zero agreements that are of any value. Affluenza and povertitis have another bad impact, and people don't always realize that, and that is they retard economic growth, which is needed to at least to eliminate poverty, but the rich also benefit from it. So it's not just planetary medicine that we need, we also need societal medicine. This is an interesting study from the European Union, and it shows a kind of a Kuznets curve, which shows that if your equity levels, the differences in society are high, the equity, that means that the differences are low, the equity is high, then you have very retarded growth. In other words, any society needs a certain amount of dynamic, which is built by entrepreneurship and all kinds of things that business needs and governments need, in which there is a certain amount of inequality in terms of income and wealth. But if you have too much inequality, which is over there, then you also don't have high growth. In other words, to get optimal growth, you have to have a balance between inequality and equality of a kind that gives you a higher. Now, all the forces, the dynamics in our world, but particularly in our own country, is pushing policy to take us to the left, which means that you will not have the kind of growth you could have. This is communism, and that, of course, we know didn't work either. So you need something over here, and at the moment, we haven't gone far enough, but the forces in China and India are to take us to the left as fast as possible, and we have to resist that. We have to stay somewhere where everyone has at least their basic need met, and then you can have a variety of different niches for people to occupy. I showed you the graph for millionaires, and I showed you a graph of hungry people in India, and now I brought them together. Isn't it amazing that the two are almost identical, are in parallel? Whenever the number of millionaires goes up, the number of hungry people goes up. The scales are a bit different. One is in the millions and one is in the thousands, but it would be very hard for you to not notice that there seems to be a relationship here. Now, I've not done research enough to say it's a causal relationship, but it's intriguing. It's the kind of thing a university like TERI University might want to look at and say, what's going on here? What sort of a curve is this? And get a couple of PhD students to find out, is there a relationship? Every time you have a millionaire, you have 1,000 people poorer? Is it possible? It certainly seems to be happening. Trickle down hasn't worked and won't. Not only for the poor, but even for this poor guy in the stock market. It's a mess all over. It's a mess. Those are the kids of that woman who was watching TV. Well, we've got all kinds of things. I won't go into the malaria map of India. Let me just go to the political boundaries. I've already covered the planetary boundaries. Those were done by the Stockholm Environment Institute. Then I did my societal boundaries, and now I'm doing the political boundaries. So, political boundaries are the kinds of things that concern us as young citizens of India together more than any of the others at the moment, because that's all the newspapers and media talk about. Degeneration of leadership leads to narrow short-term self-interest, goes to growing disparity, because the self-interest people get richer and richer, and they leave behind everybody else. That leads to skewed, very, very imbalanced power structures. The Brahmins take over and everybody else gets left behind. That leads to corruption and subsidies and all kinds of ways in which everything gets hijacked by the rich. Then you have an economics, which is really basically like a casino. And what is the stock market if it's not a casino? It's a gambling place. It's your guess is as good as mine. You go and make money or you don't. But it's a legitimized gambling casino. And then we all get into foreign lifestyles, and then we need foreign money, and then we need FDI, and then we need technology, and then we take shortcuts to that technology. And what does that mean? We just plunder nature and we plunder each other. We want more metal, we want more coal, we want more of this, we want more of that. Get rid of those silly tribals that are in the way. That's what this political cycle is all about. It's logical. You can't get away from it. The moment you have lost the leadership, everything else follows within a few years. Doesn't even take a few decades. That's why I came here today, because my job, like Lina's, is to build the leaders of tomorrow. And the leaders of tomorrow are sitting in this room. And if you go out of this room not outraged by what's happening to our country, then you've misspent your time here, and probably TERI has not been able to fulfill what it set out to do. And we've got to make sure that that doesn't happen. This diagram tells you virtually the whole problem of India today. We're in a vicious cycle which we can't seem to get out of because people are sitting back and saying it's somebody else's problem. Today, you're very privileged. This is a commercial break. Can I take a short commercial break? Tomorrow is the 25th of July. Do you know what's happening tomorrow on the 25th of July? Does anybody know here? Ah, yes. But that's not the one I was thinking about. It's happening just down the road from the President's Palace in Jantar Mantar. And in Jantar Mantar, there's going to be an event that I think is of extreme importance for us, for each one of us. And in preparation for that, I got together with my colleagues in Common Cause, which is our organization that's concerned with the rights of citizens and creating a better India. And Common Cause and I and NID, National Institute of Design, spent a few months working out a logo that would unite us all in the country. You remember the AIDS logo, the HIV/AIDS logo, the ribbon, or the recycling logo? Everybody recognize that, right? Well, you are going to see today a preview. Batman is tomorrow. That's the logo. You're the very first human beings, the very first human beings who have seen it. So you should be very proud. Tomorrow we will be launching it at Jantar Mantar. And I have taken the trouble of bringing 15 or 20 of these to be given to anyone in here who promises to be at Jantar Mantar for 2 o'clock, 2 to 5 tomorrow. And you can, and you can pay whatever you like. It's a donation which expresses your commitment to the cause. And if you want to get it for 500 rupees is fine. If you want to get it for 5 rupees is fine. But we're going to give you whatever you want as long as you turn up tomorrow with it. And do you know what the back says? Is that readable? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not a great model, but this is what I came here to show you. Commercial is over, but my people are outside with the T-shirts if anybody wants to come and collect them and come tomorrow to help us show India that we are really together. Corruption is not any longer justifiable. And I'm just going to show you why, because it is one of the fundamental reasons why we can't have a sustainable future. It is a fundamental part of the problem that we have to solve together. And, you know, I have a fairly busy day. I have quite a lot of work to do, but I found this such an important part of the retarding of progress for our people that we're spending a lot of effort and time on it. And I hope you will understand that it's not somebody else's problem. I have an organization, a building, a headquarters building just across Nehru University, on the other side of Nehru University, which is a very green building. Like TERI's buildings, we put a lot of heart and soul into it. And we vacated our previous building, which is in this site, demolished it, and recycled it into the new one. And in order to get the plans passed, to get the approvals from the MCD, to get the completion certificate from the NCD, it took us 4.5 years extra, simply because we did not pay a bribe. It cost me at least a loss of 10 crores for a bribe that could have been no more than 10 lakhs. But we have to put our money where our mouth is. Every one of us has to say, the buck stops here. Okay? So it is not going to be left to one person alone. It's not the Kejriwals and the Bedis and the Hazares that are going to do this. Each one of us has to do it. It's our country, and we have to stand up and be counted. And sustainability is a meaningless concept unless we recognize that integrity is just as important as ecological security, is just as important as the other issues of equity and social justice are concerned. Okay, so we want a just society, and we want a green economy. You all know what the ecological footprint is. Ecological footprint is the ratio between the resources we use and the capacity of Mother Earth to produce them. There are all kinds of ways to describe that, but essentially the footprint is the question of demand divided by biocapacity. When we became independent, the ecological footprint of India was probably about 40%, 35, 40%. In 1950, let's say. Today, it's close to 1.5. 1.5 means that we're using 50% more resources than are sustainably being regenerated in our country. Now, many people ask me, but how is that possible? Well, if anybody here has a bank account, you know it's possible. You can always draw down the capital. But at some point, you run out. And we're running out. You can see that with your waters, you can see that with the rivers, you can see that with the soils, you can see that with the forests. It's already visible. We're drawing down the capital that we inherited, more from Mother Nature than from our own parents, but nevertheless we inherited it, and it is going at an incredible rate. So one big issue is how do we reduce our footprint? That footprint has lots of complex issues behind it. One of the issues that I've been working on professionally for some time is the issue of resources, physical resources. Now, physical resources, when you use physical resources out of the ground and you make your roads or your dams, you need to pull out all kinds of large quantities of material. When you make a gold ring, for example, it may weigh 10 grams, but the amount of material that had to be moved in order for you to get it onto your finger was actually 10 tons. So the rucksack, we call it, the thing that the gold ring carries, is the amount of material that was actually moved in order to make it ready for you to wear. So the rucksack, which is this thing here, is something we've studied very carefully, and for each material we know how much that rucksack is. It's kind of an ecological footprint for each material. And basically, we've now got to carry our analysis at a much more sophisticated level than we did before. It's not the amount of tons of pebbles that we use in order to make gravel that we use to make the road, but the amount of material that was used in order to get that gravel into the road. So if you do your calculations, what you find is that we are way, way beyond the amount of material that we can possibly use without disrupting nature's cycles. Today, in the year 2012, our calculation shows that human beings, the global economy is moving more material than nature is, than geophysical movements. If you leave out the ocean currents and the atmospheric currents, if you talk just about the solid materials that are being moved, we are actually competing now with geophysical cycles and forces. That cannot be good. That is very disruptive. And that is why things like the phosphorus cycle and the nitrogen cycle and all these other things are getting so messed up. That champagne glass is not working. We now need something like a beer glass or a glass of water or whatever. We need something with a better shape. This is not about the catwalk. This is about a survival issue. This is a proper distribution of income and wealth around the world. Now here, they plotted in the x-axis, they plotted the Human Development Index. And on the y-axis, they plotted the ecological footprint. So this is bad from a conservation point of view, from an impact point of view, and this is bad from a human quality of life point of view. The good part is in the bottom right hand. This right hand is where every nation desires to be. High Human Development Index, low ecological footprint. And you will see that there is one country there, which is there, that actually comes within the accepted criteria for being both ecologically good and societally good. Can anyone guess what that is? Denmark? D. D is close, but it's not Denmark. Oh, I could tell you, I'll give you a hint. It's in the Western Hemisphere. It's not Bhutan. It's not Denmark. It's in the Western Hemisphere. Do you want another hint? It's in the central part of America. I couldn't hear that. Dominican Republic, no, unfortunately not. It's Cuba. Cuba is where presidents and celebrities go for their medical care. The president of Venezuela goes to Cuba for his operations. Cuba is a place where investments have been made in human well-being that have not been made virtually anywhere else. And they had to survive on their own little island. So they've been extremely good in terms of using their resources. And that is Cuba. Most people think of Costa Rica, which is also very close, but Cuba is the only one that actually makes it. You remember that planetary boundaries thing I showed you earlier? Well, in the same paper in Nature was this diagram. Now, this diagram is really one of the diagrams, one of the nightmares that keeps me awake at night. And I'll tell you why.